There's my philosophical question. Nope, up just a little bit farther. So I guess if mine had been die struck over genuine large cent, it would be a side fantasy piece. It'd be
Perfect.
fantasy and not counterfeit. It was an interesting discussion with ICG because they wanted to call it die struck, but I showed them the seam and the edge, and we went over it under the microscope, and then also went through the attribution. It couldn't be die struck. Well, they could have made counterfeit dies, but in this case, it weighed too much. It has a seam. You know, if it looks like a duck, it is a duck. This is an electrotype. So just a note, ICG is the only TPG who will actually slab counterfeit coins. None of the others offer that service. They put it in a holder that's basically the same as their normal holders, except for they have a yellow label that says education on the back and basically has a bunch of words that says that it's counterfeit. And they'll go through and they will basically identify that coin. They'll look to see what variety it may be, and they'll note it. And they'll also note things such as contemporary counterfeit or die struck counterfeits or whatever it might be. As I said, I often go to Tampa, and I always stop in and see the folks there. And I was there over the 4th of July week, and I brought more than these 7 coins, but I brought a number of coins with me. But these 7 were the one that I wanted to actually submit and have put in their holders. Now, in 2018, I went and actually had a meeting in DC with the anti-counterfeiting task force at the time, with Secret Service, and we talked about these really deceptive counterfeits. And one of the things that I showed them was an image of my 1795 large cent in one of these holders, and Secret Service liked it. But Eric has also noted that the issue is that you can separate the holder from the coin. So while the coin is in that holder, it's a great show and tell, a great presentation piece. Very obvious that it says counterfeit. It can start a lot of conversations with people when they look at the coin and say that doesn't look like a counterfeit, but I have a number of these, and I put most of my best ones in these so that I can actually use them then in exhibits and displays at some of the shows. So submitted the 7 actually in hand, and then received an email that basically came through and documented how my submission went. And the first thing you see is exciting news. View all your IC gradings in one place. Well, the gradings didn't come out exactly how some might like, but they actually came out the way I expected them to be. All of them are counterfeit. And it's interesting to note that they have a designation for counterfeit. And so that's what you see here. And the number of coins is 1799 bust dollar, an 1815 large cent, my 1836 proof Gobrick dollar, the 1793 Liberty Cap, 1804 large cent, 1916 S. That's actually contemporary counterfeit buff. And then my 1805 half cent. And they went through and noted that all of those are counterfeits. Some they noted are die struck, and just some other notes associated with the attribution for those coins. So I'm just going to actually follow this list as we go down here and just go through each of the 7 coins, okay? The very first one is a 1799 straight bust dollar. And Mike and I talked about a quarter that Russ had written an article about that was actually documented by the ANA and Annex some time ago, and it's in one of their master summary um, articles that they have where they pull all the articles out of Numismatics about counterfeits. And this is one of those that's in there. They actually had 2 examples. I actually own 2 examples. And so I got the notice on the ICG that it's not genuine and it is in fact die struck. On the next slide. So the first image is actually mine before I sent it to ICG. Again, it's very deceptive. But a couple of the tells that are documented in the ANA documentation are great. The first one is the defect in the R. And this was one of those things, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. It just basically pokes you in the eye. But the defective R is common among all these drug counterfeits. The one on the left is from the ANA article. The one on the right, it's under my microscope, is actually one of my 2 examples. And then going down a little farther, another tell, one of the things, and I've shown this coin to many people at couple different shows. And when you look at the edge is what I call modern. The edge is smooth, flat, square. It does not look like a genuine edge from the era that this was struck. And so the top one is, again, from the ANA. The bottom one is my coin. But it also has, Eric, if you look at this, it almost looks like a tooling mark.
It does.
When they were engraving the die, I mean, that looks like something that came off a CNC mill. And that common mark that you see is common to all the counterfeits, and certainly not in a genuine example. So these are two really good tells. You look for the R, flip over the edge, it's modern, and it has that mark at the T. Go on down. So I took kind of a collage of pictures. The top two are the ones out of the ANA document. The bottom one is mine. And again, they all have matching marks. Now, going down a little bit further, I actually wrote an article on one that I found that was in a TPG holder as genuine. So again, these are pretty deceptive. If you study them for some length of time, you probably wouldn't make that mistake. But this was made. I wrote an article for Coin Week. When I actually write an article on one that's been in a holder, I call it From the Dark Corner. And the coin attributes correctly as a 1799 B16 or BB 158, depending on whose designation it is. So it matches a genuine coin very, very well, other than a couple of those tells, and of course the very modern edge. This particular coin that I noted in the article was offered for sale on eBay, and it was in an NGC holder. I quickly identified it with a couple other friends that had known this variety. I notified the seller, I notified the PPG. The cert was nuked, which makes it very difficult to sell if you're actually going to that level of detail and looking to see what the cert says. The owner actually cracked it out. Once the cert was useless to him, he cracked it out. He put it up for sale again. The listing got removed, but of course you lose sight of the seller and the coin, and so I wouldn't be surprised if it hadn't been sold by now.
So real quick, there's a couple of things that there are some new people out in the crowd. For those of you who are not familiar with a TPG, it's a third-party grader. So we'll utilize a lot of acronyms because we talk about these things all the time: CAC, PCGS, NGC. If you ever hear one of these and you don't know what it means, just say what is and then the element. That way we can make sure that we are talking to you in a language that makes sense to everybody. So again, TPG is third-party grader, in case anybody didn't know. Sorry, Jack, but I need to make sure that people are tracking on all of these fronts.
Hey, Frosty, this is pretty long, and this is interactive. So anytime you want to interject anything, just go for it. No problem. You're not going to throw me off tack here or anything. Let's go down. So I added some images. This is an image of the actual coin after it was cracked out. There's a die crack in the R. That is actually common for that variety, but the big pit in the R is not common. And then what you see is a screenshot I took of the actual cert at the time. So yes, it actually was certed as AU Details Whiz, which means that somebody had gone over the surfaces to try to smooth some things out, maybe make it look a little more original. And if you pull that cert up now, that cert is no longer active.
And it doesn't mean that they peed on the coin.
No, Whiz is no. Thank you. A very important point. But they might have. I mean, somebody may have at some point in time.
Well, I was going to say, it's like I wouldn't discount it.
Exactly. All right. So the second coin is I call it the always popular 1815 large cent, and it's popular because it didn't exist. There are no 1815 dated large cents that were struck by the mint. There was a little war going on in 1812. There was copper shortage, and so what you normally see are alternate.
And also scarlet fever.
Pardon me?
And also scarlet fever.
Well, there you go. That didn't help either. What you normally see are altered date coins, and you see them from all types of the series. This one actually is a pretty good looking one. If you just look at it, the date looks really good. I got this one in hand. I purchased it from a friend and had an opportunity to do a little more analysis of it in hand. We go down a little lower. So what's interesting about this is ICG had got it absolutely right. It is actually an electrotype, and that makes it a very odd piece, because what they did is they used an 1812 obverse and they altered the date from a 12 to a 5. And then they used the reverse of an 1811. And we know that because we could attribute both of those to the varieties, one a 287, one a 290. And that's getting a little in the weeds, I know. But the fact is that they didn't just alter a coin and then try to sell it. they actually made electrotypes of that altered coin. So it makes it basically, in my mind, a fake of a fake. And, yes, PCGS, or not PCGS, ICG got it absolutely right on their cert. And then we talked the other Sunday a little bit about Daniel Carr pieces. And, Daniel.
I was that 1815 reminds me of a Daniel Carr piece.
Yeah, this one is a Daniel Carr piece. This one is actually one that he marketed, is now shown as sold out. And of course, we say this one's not counterfeit, and we say it for a number of reasons. One, he calls them, overstruck, and the other thing is he calls them fantasy dates. But I guess my piece is kind of a fantasy date as well. And I just pulled some of the nomenclature off here. He does go through a lot of notes. Defacing of U.S. coins is legal so long as the defacement isn't for fraudulent purposes. By purchasing one or more of these, you disclose what it is. And basically, he's going through and saying that if you try to sell it as a genuine coin, then there's probably going to be an issue because it's not, and it's a fantasy coin. So not only does he sell those coins, but if you scroll down a little bit further, ICG actually slabs them. And of course, Great Collections actually sells them. So there's his, the Overstruck Classic 1 cent Fantasy 1815. So doesn't look all that different from my piece, but mine was a genuine large cent, and it's not been overstruck. Down a little further.
So real quick before we go on any farther, you talked earlier about having something in an ICG holder when you were talking about sitting down with your Secret Service folks and
Yes.
talking about the really high grade items. ICG does this. I get it. It's listed as a fantasy piece. Why doesn't the Secret Service have a problem with what he does? Because again, just like the other coins, they can break these out. They can put these into, obviously, maybe there's a mark or something on here that people are know. But if they don't know, then what's to prevent somebody from cracking this out and selling it as authentic?
Well, that's why he puts his disclosures on his website and says, please don't do that because it'll probably create some issues and consequences.
Can I take a whack at that?
Yeah, because I've had some discussions about that as well. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, knowing or having talked to Daniel, having interviewed him and stuff like that, he charges a big premium for his coin. So it behooves you, if you look at his coin, it is definitely a date that's never been made. So it is overstruck on a piece of that exact type. So he's not introducing something new. He's making something that was that into just a different date. The only nefarious activity that can come from these will come from greed. So if you put it out there and you offer it for sale, okay, and you disclose what it is, then when somebody goes to buy this coin, if they then do something nefarious with them, that is their crime and their greed. I mean, Daniel kind of feels like as long as the people are paying a premium for them, they're probably not going to try and get rid of them. They're probably going to keep them. And like I said, as far as them, being inherited by somebody and then offered by somebody else, what it really comes down to is, do they disclose it? And if they don't know and they offer it, they're going to offer it really cheap, and somebody greedy is going to come in and do it. So it's like, it is really just, if you do bad things with these, it's because you're going to do bad things in general. But there's nothing inherently bad in the coins, in the fact that, so like his 2009 proof Silver Eagles were, I think, the ones that made the biggest stink. And it's because they didn't make a proof Silver Eagle in 2009. Well, they've got a clear DC mark on the back of them. And everybody knows they don't exist, so it's one of those things where I see where people could say, well, he really shouldn't be doing it. But to be honest with you, he's not really hurting anything. He's not introducing more coins of a type. If he's doing a type 1 Indian or a type 1 Buffalo, he's using a type 1 Buffalo to do it. He's doing peace dollars. He's using peace dollars to do it.
So I absolutely understand the premise of that. However, and again, just speaking in general terms, right? I always try to play the devil's advocate.
Absolutely.
Whenever we have discussions. And so this is something, and Eric and I were talking about this before you guys came on this morning, about reading the details, right? And if you're going to be buying something online, somebody who is creating a coin, and we'll talk about the primary actor of China or India or Korea or Peru or whomever's creating counterfeits, if their intent obviously is to deceive and to fool and to do stuff like that. But they create 1958 cents. They create coins that don't exist. Is it just because, I mean, you look at some of these disclaimers and they tell you that it's a fantasy piece. They tell you that it's a facsimile. And they're written in very small details hidden in the corner somewhere. Does that mean that it's okay? So my thing is, and I understand the cautionary tale, I understand, but there's a fundamental tenet of what is counterfeit, what is a fake, and it all goes down. What I want people to get to, and I was hoping that you would use the one word that really matters here. And I'm hoping Jack knows that word that I'm looking for. But it all goes to intent. Right?
That's the word I stay away from because it's so hard to judge intent.
Well, but that's the thing. And so when you're looking at, Secret Service, or when you're looking at investigations, the one thing that's very unclear is that the intent is to defraud or deface or to present it as something it's not, with the clear intention of deceiving, right? We talk about misinformation versus disinformation. Misinformation is, I say the 1909S VDB when I'm talking about an Indian head scent, or that fancy one that Jack showed on his Fun with Fakes, where you have the Indian head reverse with the Lincoln head obverse.
The double S coin.
The very double S, yeah. The rare S mark on both the front and the back of the coin.
And disinformation is any Eric Miller video.
Well, but disinformation is meant to actually provide information knowing the person doesn't have the correct information. So if you are providing, and a lot of it is AI generated, people don't know the difference. They just regurgitate what AI produces. That's misinformation. Disinformation is if you take a 1909 SVDB and you sell that as a one of a kind. That's disinformation, where that information is not to be true. However, you manipulate it and do so. We talked about this when there was a person in the community who said something was a scam. It's not a scam. It's that they didn't understand it. And so when we talk about things like this, when we talk about fantasy coins or we talk about stuff like that, what makes it okay for somebody like Daniel Carr, who worked at the Mint and knows that there's a legal requirement, and somebody who's creating a coin to deceive? What's the fundamental difference? And I guess that's something that each of you have to decide on your own. Well, because there's some discussion there.
But since you're playing devil's advocate, let me answer that. In Daniel's case, Daniel is not creating something that doesn't exist. Daniel is taking a large cent and just altering it. Daniel is taking a peace dollar and altering it, a buffalo nickel and altering it. And then he clearly labels and sells them that way. So it's like, there's your intent. His intent is to provide a fantasy piece. That's why he's different.
Mike,
he's not creating silver eagles from silver blanks. He's overstriking them on real silver eagles.
What were you going to say, Jack?
Well, I mean, Mike says he presents them as he does, but they're not in a slab. They're not marked copy. They're not marked anything. I mean, again, go to his website. He's got a number of disclaimers basically telling people, don't try to sell this as a genuine coin. You talk about it's altered. Well, mine's altered, but mine, if I try to sell it as genuine, is a counterfeit. And I struggle. I understand that these are works of art. There's a place in the hobby for these people. They're highly collectible. And I guess the one that I always go back to is the 1964 DP dollar. And if there was ever a coin that was really skirting it, in my opinion, it's that one. Yeah, we can say there aren't any out there, but how many nefarious things have happened at the Mint where coins have been smuggled out or whatever has happened? And we know that there were 1964 DP dollars made. They were struck.
Yep.
by the U.S. government. And so he sells that. And as far as being overstruck, you know, the last time we talked about this, and we don't want this to be an argument. This is just a discussion.
No,
No, not at all. Not at all.
But Frosty made the comment that he'd like to see the proof that it was overstruck on whatever the planchet was supposed to be. And the only one I have is so underweight and shows no undertype that I even sent a note to Daniel and asked him about it. And I really didn't get a clear definition of that. So
I am not going to be the Daniel Carr apologist because I really don't know the man very well. I have seen a lot of his products, and I will tell you that at least every product that I've seen, you can see the undertype. And that's where I'm like, I can see it. I don't have a really big problem with it because who's the original manufacturer of the product? The U.S. Mint.
I'm happy to send you mine, Mike, because I've had it under my microscope.
Okay, well, like I said, all the ones that I've seen, and there hasn't been a lot of them, but the ones that I've seen, I can see the undertype. So maybe he's changed that over time. I don't know. And like I said, I don't really want to. I mean, it's been a good 10 years since I talked to Daniel, or since I had any of his pieces in my hand.
And again, folks, I want to be very clear. I am not an anti-Daniel Carr issue. I think what he does is really cool. But there becomes a point, and this is where, you talk about the duality of thought. We see this in every aspect of life. It doesn't matter where you go, what you do. Replicas of artwork, replicas of really neat sculpture-based pieces. Maybe it's writings. Maybe it's a diamond against a lab-based diamond. Whatever that might be. Things like this muddy the water, and so there's lots of discussions about, is it okay to do this? Should this be something that's listed? Because once again, Ms. Coin Crew said something in chat that once the paperwork is lost, or once the person who has it doesn't actually know what the hell this is, and somebody takes it over, there is no knowledge. Earlier, Mike, you said this, and I know we use the term always or everybody loosely, and I know that's not what you meant, but I'm just going to utilize this as an example. Not everybody knows that 1815 doesn't exist. And we know this because people buy fake Morgans or the 1796 peace dollar or the 1851 Washington quarter, whatever, 1858 or whatever it was, that was created the same year the designer was born in. And so we see these same things. Are they not fantasy pieces in a sense? But just because he knows the legalese doesn't make it okay. And it's just a philosophical question that needs to be discussed, because it's one of those things that if you know the loophole, now it becomes legal. And I fundamentally have a problem with how do you, there should be, my personal thing, there should be a defining mark. Now, on some of these, Daniel Carr has his DC logo, right? So there's a definitive mark that shows that this is there. I think something like that should be put into there, not necessarily copy, because you don't want to ruin, and Jack, we talk about this when it's
he could put it on the rim.
Finding these coins or something. Say again?
He could put it on the rim.
Wherever, right? Something that is definitive that shows this is a replica or something of that nature. And so again, I'm not poo-pooing Daniel Carr. Okay, I actually have one of his slabs. I know Paula has one. I know you have one. But again, it's one of those where it is just like everything. It has the opportunity to be abused. Oh, Azure. Perfect. Your statement is exactly what I was trying to state. So while we go through this, the reason I interrupted Jack and wanted to ask this question and kind of to pose this to people is, as you look through these, understand that as Jack is talking about these, he has received these or identified these in the realm of people utilizing them for nefarious purposes. So I want you to understand that he didn't see the ICG slab like this and then crack it out and send it in and say, hey, it's fake. He actually found one that somebody was trying to pass off as authentic. And so granted, it's not the same piece, but it is the same coin. And so people may not know the difference between the two. So what Jack is trying to do is really teach and educate people to understand there are these things out there that are quote unquote legitimate, but this one is not. So I really want people to understand the difference between those. Does that make sense?
You know, not to be a smart aleck, but I'll tell you what, they buy that coin, they're going to learn too.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
You know, I'm just saying.
But does that, Jack, does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. So again, let's get back to your presentation. I didn't want to off steer that too much, but there's important aspects when we're talking about stuff, because I can never assume that everybody in chat knows what we're saying. And I want people to understand that there's a fundamental difference between a Daniel Carr piece and this piece that he showed here. That's not a Daniel Carr piece. That's somebody tried to manipulate one and create a counterfeit one, right?
Correct.
This isn't a Daniel Carr piece. And so there's a lot of people out there that will not know that difference. So what makes one legitimate and one not? And that's the philosophical piece I wanted to get you guys to think about, because as we're going through here, I want you to understand Jack's intent is to teach us about the counterfeits that are out there, not to bash Daniel Carr. So again, Jack, I'll give that time back to you. I needed that point to be stated.
No, it's fine. And go down a little bit further. There's my philosophical question. Nope, up just a little bit further. So I guess if mine had been die struck over genuine large sin, it would be a dark side fantasy piece. It'd be
Perfect.
fantasy and not counterfeit. It was an interesting discussion with ICG because they wanted to call it die struck, but I showed them the seam and the edge, and we went over it under the microscope, and then also went through the attribution. It couldn't be die struck. Well, they could have made counterfeit dies, but in this case, it weighed too much. It has a seam. You know, if it looks like a duck, it is a duck. This is an electrotype. So this is a counterfeit if someone tries to sell it as a genuine 1815 large cent. All right, going down a little farther. This is one of my favorites.
Mine too.
Well, these were so good. I've documented 14 now, I think. At least 10 of them were in TPG holders, 2 of them in major auctions. This is really, really, really a good die struck counterfeit that came from the source that I've talked about before that was located in Texas. And what's funny about this one, if you look at the label, they went through and actually identified what it is because it's the second emission for that year, which is considered a restrike, but they called it destruck. So I've got a error counterfeit coin, which probably makes it worth all that much more, right?
What do they mean by destruck?
It was supposed to be die. That was my point. They made an error on the label, and I have a lot of people telling me about it. That makes it worth even more. It's a counterfeit with a mistake in the label, if you would. Can we get that larger? I can actually see it. So I talk about the fact I've written a number of articles on this. I've written articles for Coin Week. I've written articles for Proxy. I've written an article that actually was in the Liberty City Collectors Gobrick Dollar Journal. And so it's a very, very well documented counterfeit. We go down a little bit further. So this one actually was on eBay. It was for sale by a seller that had actually sold another of the very good die struck counterfeits, one of the 1806 half cents. And he sent it into the TPG to have it certified. And it came back, as you see. They go through and again, they talk about the die alignment. They talk about all those good things. So they attributed the coin. And then they called it altered surfaces. In this particular coin, it appears that they went through and reworked the surfaces in an effort to remove some of the pesky attribution marks that I identified in all the articles, but it didn't come back as counterfeit. And I've had a discussion with the TPG about that unfortunately, when something comes back like this and it doesn't say it's not genuine or it doesn't say it's counterfeit, then many times the seller feels empowered to sell it as genuine. It doesn't say it's not. It just said that the surfaces were messed with. And so that seller put it up for sale for $10,000 and said it'll probably be worth a whole lot more if you happen to get it to go through a TPG and get it slapped. A good friend.
In fact, Jack, I would look at that label and say that they are saying it's genuine. I would think that.
Yes. And again, I had that discussion. I said, now what I don't know is if the TPG missed it, because that TPG has a few of these actually in their holders as genuine. So I don't know that, between 2018 and here we are, 2025, if that was something they just missed. But the surfaces were altered. There's no question they were messed with. And so maybe it was just the easy way out and not actually say there was something wrong with the coin. But it did go up for sale. A good friend negotiated a price and sent it to me, allowed me to do some pretty good articles for it. I've just submitted or pictures of it, and I've just submitted an article to Coin Week about it. And so then I took it into ICG and went over it with Skip. Down a little bit further.
So John Shank said you couldn't bury it for a couple of years and get it resurfaced and reissue it. It's actually a fake coin. It's not just the altered surface.
And that is the issue. That is absolutely right. So this is that coin, and you can see the die orientation of it as it was struck. This would have been out of the second emission of coins for the 1836 dated Gilbricks. You go a little bit further. This one is my other one. So I have two, both from the same group, if you would, of sellers. This one actually was certified as genuine. So this is a struck counterfeit in a genuine holder. They went through a lot of attribution information on the label, proof, J60, restrike, repaired, cleaned. The original coin had a hole in it and was repaired, and then the dies are so accurate that they basically duplicated everything from that coin into the die struck counterfeits. And again, I've chased about 14 of these at this point.
I just think it's cool that you have two of those because, again, when we're talking about the dollar amount, yes, he said over $10,000. And again, if I'm not mistaken, this one was another fun show. Like you saw this at the fun show, correct?
Well, yeah, I saw another one in Chicago. That's the one where Mike actually asked me on the way out of the show, did you find any counterfeits? I found another one of these. It was raw, and it was a dealer's inventory in Chicago and Central States.
And he wasn't happy about it.
Yeah, I wrote an article on that. He was really, really frustrated over it. So, yes. So there have been two that we've seen over the last several months. And there were 12 or so that I'd seen back around 2018 to 2020. So this is the gift that keeps giving. They just keep coming back.
He like a proof 20. Wow.
Well, those coins were considered proofs, and a lot of them got into circulation. So you see them in various stages. I've seen one that was a fair too, but minor counterfeit. So these are the key attribution points. I did this for that Standing Liberty Quarter last Sunday, I believe.
And this is the stuff that belongs in a book, in an encyclopedia.
I've had someone offer to fund my book if I ever sit down and do it.
I'm telling you, this is the kind of stuff that needs to be published.
Yeah, it does. And it's semi-published because, again, if you go into Coin Week, every one of my articles is there. And these attribution items are all there. But these are the key points, and these are common to all of them. And one of the things I showed there with the F is there was a hole in the original coin, and the back of the F, they plugged the hole and they had to re-engrave the back of the F. And so it's blunted off, and it's common, again, with all the counterfeits. So when
And not to get too far off the beaten path, but maybe you should approach Coin Week about maybe a collaboration.
no, that's possible. Like I
They
said,
might help you publish it.
I think I have 85 articles now with Charles and Coin Week. But so anyhow, that's it for the 1836 Go Brick. These things are very dangerous. They're still out there. They're still showing up. You know, along with that 1806 half cent as I use as my little icon for when I'm on here on Sundays. So the next one is my 1793 Liberty Cap large cent. And I had made a comment, I think last Sunday, we talked about what are our favorite designs. And I said the 1793 Liberty Cap large cent is my favorite. This is not it. So don't be mistaken with this one. This one says not genuine. It says altered. This actually was a 1794 S63 large cent. And someone went through the effort to re-engrave the obverse, not only to change the date to 1793, but 1793 Liberty Caps had beaded borders, and 1794s have denticles. So they took a 1794 S63 and cut beads all the way around the obverse, re-engraved the date, re-engraved Liberty to strengthen it, and actually changed some of the hair details. The interesting thing with this one is the reverse was left untouched, and it was proven a few years ago that the 1793 large cent reverse was actually retooled and used in 1794 on this variety. So that reverse actually is the same reverse, with the exception that they cut denticles over the beads. So that one went in reverse. So the obverse is re-engraved, the reverse is exactly as that coin was struck. So someone knew a little bit about what they were doing. They understood attribution, and they made a really good pick for the variety of 1794 to create a 1793.
It was Barber messing with Morgan.
Somebody was in a fight over this, and that's right. All right, down a little further. And I talk a little bit about it, and then there is an actual 1793. And again, I love this design. It's simple. These coins are extremely scarce. There weren't that many made. It's been attributed to Joseph Wright as far as being the designer for it. But that reverse, and you can see the beads. That reverse was recut because the mint many times, under all the cost constraints they had, would use dies until they broke, and sometimes they continue to use them even after they were broken. So they grabbed the 1793 reverse and actually cut denticles over it and made a 1794 variety. Go a little further. Okay, so my next one is a key date large cent, an 1804 large cent. And again, it's an electrotype, so this was identified obviously correctly on the label, not genuine. Then you on down. My images aren't the best in the slabs, but I got some better images going down a little bit further. This coin was actually sold in the ESC auction this past year. It's cool in that it's got a pretty good provenance for it. Dennis Loring, Pete Smith are both giants of early American coppers, and they own this. This actually goes back to 1987, and it's actually very good. If you just looked at the front and reverse, everything about it is right. The die orientation is right for a genuine 1804. You can see traces of a seam on the edge when you really look at it closely. Down a little farther. And I've written a number of articles on this particular coin. I've actually found 4 or 5 different examples. So they made several of these. So they didn't just make that one. And one was actually sold in a major auction, but it was identified as an electro, so it was sold as such. I found a couple on eBay. One, the gentleman was trying to sell it as genuine until I showed him what was wrong with it. And so this is one of my proxy blog articles talking about this 1804 electrotype. Then a little further.
There's a couple questions in chat regarding how many people have actually been arrested and charged with counterfeiting. I don't know about in the US. I know there's a few, but I know in London, it was a crime against the crown, and they actually have quite a few documented cases of being drawn and quartered. And the Crag Coin Veilers is a great story if you ever want to look into that one. So if you want to talk more about some of those, I've done a couple of videos on those. You can do that. We could talk about that afterwards.
And you should also look into the trial of the pigs.
So this is a 1916 S Buffalo. They say not genuine die struck. That they're correct. This is actually a contemporary counterfeit, and I've got a lot better picture going down. But this is one's been identified by Winston Zach, and I've circled. This is my example when it was raw. There is a die break. It's a two feather, a die break through the feathers. You can see it. I've circled it. There are several of these that Winston has identified. The weights aren't quite right. It's German silver, so it's not a mint product. You go down a little bit further, and this is actually the image he gave me permission to use. He calls it a TD1 TDA, and he actually shows this is out of his book, so his Bad Metals book, which I highly recommend. I own 2 volumes at this point. I bought his latest one that goes through dollars. This one went through early cents and went through nickels. And I mean, it's a great reference guide for anybody interested in contemporary counterfeits. I made the comment, if you want to know more, buy his book. And then the last of the group is an 1805 off center. And this one actually came from Winston. He had purchased a large lot of coins and was going through it, gave me first dibs on some of the ones that were counterfeit. This one, I've written an article in Coin Week. I've written articles also for EAC. You can see the obverse and reverse there. It is a family of counterfeits that's based on an 1804 C6, which is a known variety, 1804 spike chin half cent. And that common reverse is used for all of them. And if you go down a little bit further, there's actually a die chip on a genuine 1804 C6 reverse, and I've circled it on the right. That is a genuine example. It's also on the counterfeits, so I've circled it there on the left. And I just wrote a Pennywise article for EAC. It actually just got published in the last article there about this particular coin. I own several of these, but I never had one that was off-center. And it's quite interesting that they went through the effort to strike an off-center version. I've not seen another one other than this one that Winston had. Go down a little bit further, and it just shows basically the image from my article, from my Pennywise article for EAC.
Is this a contemporary counterfeit? How long do you think that this has been out? Or has this been out for a long time?
This is current Chinese. This goes back, that family, I trace it back to like 2007, 2008. And you continue to see them in all the main selling venues, particularly eBay. Once you understand that reverse and you understand that die chip, then you know what you're looking at. You know that it's one of the, I call them just current Chinese counterfeits. They're an intermediate level. They're actually very well done. That date is very close to 2 varieties of genuine half cents, but it's just a little bit off. And then of course the reverse is wrong for the date. So, and then I just close it out here with another image of my wonderful Go brick. But one of the things up at the top, if you look at the label, you know, it says for educational purposes only. Again, these are, to me, these are cool. They're the only TPG that'll actually do it. You can see some of the language across it. Falsifying, I guess. Chung, I don't know what Chung means. Fake, education. But
it's fake in all kinds of different languages.
I think that's exactly what it means, Mike. There's no question that that one's fake, even though that one, again, is one of those very dangerous, very deceptive die-struck counterfeits.
Outstanding. Well, Jack, thank you so much for going through that submission. I know there were questions. Why would anybody want to slab these? Number one, some of these are, as Jack stated at the very beginning, some of the best ones that he's identified and has helped talk a lot with other people about. Again, you're talking about the one that's on screen. That's a $10,000 coin in reality. And so why wouldn't you want to have this slabbed as counterfeits and then give it in a show, put it on a table and allow people to look at it, really kind of understand what's there? It's about sharing information. That's the whole premise of what we do on the channel, right? Is to provide you guys information to make you smarter and better collectors.